Welcome to MCN and welcome to the first UK test of the brand new Ducati Desert X. So we're here at Sweet Lamb at the Ducati Riding Experience, which is the official Ducati school in the UK. We've got 6,500 acres to play on. So we're going to go and ride it, and I really do think we're in for a fantastic day. So the Ducati Desert X was launched originally in 2022, and it was, a new era for Ducati coming into this sort of middleweight, quite focused adventure bike, a very competitive market. You've got a lot of bikes, a lot of established bikes in that class, from the Tenere through to the Triumph, through to the KTM, etc., etc. So it was a fierce competition, and Ducati being Ducati came in all guns blazing. The bike was sort of a throwback to the Cagiva Elephant, and I think it kind of moved the game on in terms of the styling of the bike and the look of the bike. But fast forward 4 years and the market has changed, the market's evolved, the competition has ultimately got stiffer. What we've seen from the competition on that matter is a lot of bikes have kind of had sort of small evolutions, whereas Ducati with the 2026 Desert X, this is a ground up new motorcycle. Different engine, different chassis, different suspension, everything. It shares practically zero common parts from the 2022 bike. So it really is, a new chapter in terms of middleweight adventure bikes. So starting with the engine, it's using the V2 engine, which has obviously been used across other bikes in the Ducati range, and using that as a platform. And one of the claims they made prior to the launch of this bike was that 70% of the torque was delivered by 3,000 RPM. And that, to be fair, was one of the areas where the old bike kind of almost felt a little bit lazy. I've been lucky enough to do quite a few hours on the old bike, and it was a very easy bike to ride, but it did feel quite big, it felt quite long. And even though it was a powerful engine and it gripped well, it didn't really have a great deal of sort of punch. It always felt like you needed the revs to kind of build before you started getting the momentum. This is a different proposition, and it is far, far better as a result. So now, as opposed to being almost like waiting for it, now you've just got the throttle in your hand from the word go. The way it responds, the way it picks up is like super clean and super nice. This is obviously, the competition also have gone down the road of parallel twin motors. They always come in with a bit of a bang. They're always a little bit harsh off the bottom. This is obviously a true V-twin. A lot of those parallel twins, they play around with cranks and things like that to try and give it a more of a genuine V-twin feel. Ducati don't have to do that. It is a V-twin, and it is, with this new motor, you really have got the best of both worlds in terms of just how smooth it is, and that's also been helped with variable valve timing. So how smooth it is off the bottom, but also just the sort of how instant that power is in your hand from the word go. And then once you get the thing picked up, it revs beautifully. I'm really impressed about how much grip it's generating. I mean, we're here in Wales, and it's actually very, very dry, as you can see, very dusty and actually quite slick. So what we're finding is normally it's quite a low grip environment, but the amount of grip you're able to generate while still having that instant kind of punch off the bottom is genuinely putting a smile on my face. In conjunction with that, it's an all-new chassis. So now it's an aluminium monocoque chassis, which is definitely stiffer. The old bike, I always felt quite long. It was very, very stable, but it did sort of take a bit of body English to get the thing to turn and to change direction. This, again, is a completely different proposition. The way that you're positioned on the bike, you're a little bit further forward, the rider's a little bit further forward, and there's actually a little bit more weight bias towards the rear of the bike. But that, in conjunction with how the throttle responds, you just feel like you can sort of pick a line, change direction, really, really comfortable, really, really easy, and again, sort of grin-inducing. It's really turned into a more sort of engaging and a more fun motorcycle. On the subject of the suspension, they've made changes to the front. It's still got 46mm KYB suspension, but whereas before we had one leg for compression, one leg for rebound, now both legs are doing the same. That feels very planted. And the rear, the big thing here is that they introduced a monoshock linkage, basically, system, but which gives a more progressive feel on the suspension. So at slower speed, it's quite compliant. But then if you are having bigger hits and it comes further into the stroke, it naturally stiffens up because you've got the linkage to control that rather than it just being a completely linear performance. Also, I think a really nice touch is that, you know, most linkages come out at the bottom of the shock and come out of the bottom of the bike, which obviously can interfere with ground clearance, can interfere with, you know, potential damage. Ducati have actually positioned all the linkage at the top of the shock, the top of the bike, out of harm's way. And it's I had a look at it earlier, and it's a real kind of work of art how they've done that, and that is working very, very well. On the subject of electronics, Ducati, I think, you know, they're renowned for their sort of prowess in this market, and I think genuinely it's where normal people like us can get the benefit of what these manufacturers are doing on track. So in MotoGP, in World Superbikes, where obviously the level of electronic and engine management is very, very advanced, you know, this is, you know, the saying, you know, that racing improves the breed. You know, this is what we're getting, is we're just getting this technology sort of filtered down. And, you know, it's not just Ducati, you know, every manufacturer, the standard of electronics is just getting better and better and better. And this is very much in line with that. The level of control you've got in terms of engine braking strategies or engine braking settings, you can tailor how much engine braking you want. You've got wheelie control. Again, you can have everything off, or you can have, you know, it quite intrusive. You've got traction control, and you've got different powers. And there's a lot of sort of preset settings, but then you can also get into those further and really tailor it to your needs. And all of those changes can be made on the fly. So it just enables you to kind of, you know, play with it. You've got a very kind of, you know, pretty intuitive system on your left-hand handlebar. You can really kind of get into it and work out what you want, when you want it, for different types of riding. And what we're also seeing, like I mentioned, it's quite a sort of a slick terrain, but if you have the traction control, if you have it on sort of setting sort of 3, which is kind of like the standard setting within the enduro mode, which gives you 75 horsepower, it's nice. It's not a vicious cut by any stretch. It kind of lets you play a little bit, the rear wheel slide, but it will never kind of get out of control. And the further you come down now, I've actually been running this in 1 now. And what you find there is, you know, if you get hard on the gas, yes, it will break traction. Yes, it will hang out, but it kind of does this thing where it sort of makes you better than you actually are, because it kind of sits out there, carries on driving, never really gets too out of control and too wayward. And as a result, you genuinely feel like you're actually making progress. You know, you're not just sat there spinning for the sake of it, you know, destroying your tyre and you know, roosting your mate behind you. Actually feels like it's finding the right level of spin and propelling you forward. And again, that all works in conjunction with that linkage system and the fact that it's a V-twin, and just inherently it does generate more grip. Okay. Tight corner there. What I'm impressed about is the way that it digs in. Being the V-twin, and it revs. Okay, right, left down, we've got a bit of a jump here. Whoa! Okay. Feels planted up there. Bit loose there, getting a bit of rise, changing direction. It's quite slick here, but the way you can change direction, and then that sort of corresponds with the fact that this new kind of motor
And the power characteristic, just you could just give it a little bluff of throttle just to get the thing to turn. And there, just being able to lift the front. Whoa! Big compression there, but it soaks it up. The old Desert X would have bottomed out there. Off camber, downhill, getting the weight on the outside of the bike. Nice, just you can make that initial connection, the thing turns into a gully. This one's a bit more technical, a bit narrow. Lovely little kicker here. Nice, gets narrow through here. And a bit greedy with the wheelie. There we go. And I love that lap. Love that lap.
I think what's also been interesting, talking to Andrea Rossi, who is the man kind of in charge of the overall development of this motorbike, sort of the ultimate sort of project manager, the chassis, engine, dynamics, electronics, etc., is that there are pains to me to sort of stress how much they've sort of gone to the market, gone to existing customers, gone to people like the guys at DRE Sweet Lamb here, and asked them, genuine, honest feedback. So one of the criticisms of the old bike was the fact that the air filter, you had to take the tank off to get any access to the air filter, and it wasn't a simple job. And that's no good if you're out on the trail and you drown the bike, for example. You need to get access. So they've addressed that. The monocoque chassis is now the actual airbox, which I think is also a pretty cool idea. And now the sort of like almost like a cartridge kind of airbox, which is accessible from the front here. Three or four screws, and you're basically in there, and you've got access to it. It's also a plastic tank. The previous model was a metal tank. I think they've just tried to make it a more sort of friendly, a more usable bike for whether you're essentially just using on a road and want to do the odd trail, or whether you're going all the way to the other end of the scale and you actually want to compete on one of these. And on that subject, it's a really nice touch, which Andrea ran us through earlier, just the fact that you've got like a dedicated rally screen within your dash here, where you can like have it like as a trip. So if you want to be cross-referencing it on a road book and stuff like that, they really are sort of thinking about that side of things. There's some accessories, I think, with the bike, which the normal stuff, upgraded bash plate. You can also get an 8-litre auxiliary fuel tank on the back, grab rails, bull bars, that kind of thing, heated grips, etc., etc. And also they've increased the service intervals. So we're now looking at 45,000 kilometres for valve checks, and just regular servicing is at 15,000, so 9,000 miles for servicing. So pretty good intervals, given that most bikes are sort of 9,000. I'm guessing, Ducati are sort of at pains to sort of work on that side of things, because I think people of my sort of generation always have that sort of feeling that Ducatis are super expensive to run and need an awful lot of maintenance. I think they've very much gone away from that with a lot of their bikes in their range. So I guess one of the big questions is where it sits in the competition. Like I mentioned at the start, there is a lot of competition in this market. There's also quite a lot of range of what each manufacturer is trying to do. Someone like KTM with their 890 Adventure R, that's a very focused, very capable middleweight middleweight adventure bike, which I guess for me has always kind of been the sort of benchmark. I ran one of those as my long-term test bike a few years ago, and I had a 790 even before that. In terms of the way it behaves and the way that it actually works, I think that it's a really engaging, fantastic bike to be on. And I think that the previous Ducati wasn't quite as engaging. It wasn't quite as interactive as that. Whereas this, I think, is much, much sharper, steers much better, much more potent engine. So it's gone very much more in line with that sort of premium kind of off-road focus 890 Adventure. Price is always a contentious subject with any of these bikes. We're seeing them go up I believe the introductory offer on this bike is $14,999, which, pretty much fits in with the other makes. Triumph, their desert version of their 900 Pro, I think it comes in at $14,999. The book price of the KTM's $13,999. And even bikes like, Yamaha's World Raid is, high 11s, but that's a bike that, has kind of got probably 40 horsepower less, a lot less, lower quality components is my point. Although a very, capable bike, and I don't want to be dissing any Tenere fans out there. We know what a great motorbike that and a great platform that has been for people doing genuine adventure bike riding. But what I'm trying to say is that, Ducati is 110 horsepower genuine V-twin motorcycle. So you can kind of justify where some of these costs are actually going. So look, I've obviously kind of waxed lyrical about this bike, and there's a couple of things that I don't like. I'm not going to lie, I'm struggling to be genuinely honest. I think because the way it makes you feel on the bike is definitely put a smile on my face. I don't like I really like the loop, the sort of rear loop they had on the old bike. I thought that was a really nice touch. And I think, bizarrely, I don't actually like the styling that much. I think, we've sort of known Ducati to be making, beautiful motorbikes, real aspirational motorbikes. And I just feel that it's almost just a little bit too simple, a little bit too plain, especially given the old bike with the rally version, especially in the red and the white and the black, I think looked absolutely awesome. So that's the main thing I'm kind of disappointed with. But, in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty minimal. So we're going to carry on riding this afternoon. We're going to do had quite a mix of terrain. And then right at the end of the day, I'll give you a final verdict of what we think and what else we've learned about the bike. Right, so we finished riding for the day, and it's been a fantastic day. I mean, riding with Andrea, he kind of told me afterwards he's a two-time Maxi Enduro Italian champion. I mean, I realised he knew what he was doing fairly on, but yeah, he was kind of next level, but an absolute pleasure to ride with him. Talking of pleasures, the bike, it's a big step. Like I said earlier, the original Desert X was a great motorbike, but it did have some areas where it kind of probably wasn't as dynamic, wasn't as engaging as some of the competition. Now they have very much addressed all of those issues and more. It's a really playful, fun bike. The more I've ridden it, the more I've enjoyed it, the more I've experimented with the traction control and the different power settings, and the thing's alive. It makes you feel good, and it makes you, like I said, the combination of the way body position on the bike, the way it turns in terms of the sort of extra rigidity of the chassis, and the power, having the power in your hand all the time. It's a joy, honestly, it's an absolute joy. And look, you don't have to take my word for it. You can come, we're very spoilt here in the UK. We have genuinely great riding schools, BMW, Suzuki, Honda, Yamaha, and Ducati. There are opportunities for you to come and ride these bikes in their kind of natural habitat and decide for yourself. But for me, it's a step on what was already very solid platform, and now I do believe it's just kind of raised the bar. Thanks very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and we'll be posting more videos like this in the future.